Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along to Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be discussing the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence. What in the world does that mean? Joining me in the studio today is Colette Lee. She's an emotional intelligence trainer and also a speaker. But I think what we're going to be talking about a little bit in detail today is also leadership as well. Colette, lovely to have you on the programme today.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned as we were walking into the studio that there was a differentiation between leadership, coaching, leaders, what you can teach them, what you can't teach them. For those people that don't know what you do or understand what you do, what do you do?
Right, I've been at the forefront looking at emotional intelligence for the last 20 years, for over 20 years, researching, teaching, speaking, writing about it. I have the strapline of Voice of Emotional Intelligence because I like to talk about it, but also the development of it is in the language that we use, which is a stimulus inside and out. So I work with organisations, usually at quite a senior level, so the business owners, helping them find a direction, but with senior executives and their teams to bring emotional intelligence development into the organisation and show them the value and the results. Because at the moment it can be a little bit of just a strap line or another term that we use and put it on a tick sheet and say this is what we need. So we need to show people how to use this. So it's the application and the transformation that I bring in.
So I need a little bit more clarity because I am one of the slower thinking, and when you talk about this emotional intelligence, this emotional connection, what are you actually talking about in the workplace? What exactly are the things that people would see after you've been in?
The results, like emotions when they come to us, they come in multiples. People, organisations that I work with, first of all, develop influential leaders, which we're asking leaders to work in an environment, they call it VUCA, so volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. Traditional leadership training looks at a set of behaviours or a set of actions that they need to learn to follow in a particular situation. It's not possible anymore. So we need to look at how leaders respond to certain situations. Who are they and what are they bringing to the table? So it's an inside-out job. So we start with emotional intelligence. The reason we do that is, how about if most of your life you have been missing half the information that you need in decision making, building relationships and taking care of your own well-being, and more importantly now, the well-being of others in the organisation. Emotions have data, just like a list of figures or an instruction manual or knowing how to do your job over years. What we've not been trained to do or taught to do or value is the data that our emotions have. So they have bits of information in them that are valuable, but until we listen to the data, it's just a jumble of information that isn't made sense of. So when we turn it round and we do something with it, the emotions then become useful data that we can use. So you get smarter.
So what you're saying then is that people step back and they can actually assess what their own emotions are and what the emotions of others are as well.
Yeah, and we need to start with ourselves, because if we are frustrated in a situation, that will usually come out. We feel it ourselves, but we take it out on others. I'll give you a good example if you like.
Go on then.
I was working with one of my senior executives a couple of months ago on a week-long programme, and I was with her team, and by the third day she was getting a bit frustrated that things weren't going to plan. So she came into the room and she stood right at the beginning, right at the front of the room, and said, right, this isn't going to plan. What we need to do is X, Y and Z, and you'll be doing this and you'll be doing that. And the energy in the room just dropped completely. People were disengaged, whereas they'd been enthusiastic. So when we had a little chat later on, she said, I was so frustrated. I said, yes, and where was that word? And she's like, oh. What she needed to do was come and say, I feel frustrated that things aren't going as I would have liked them to, either we're going to do this or you're going to do it. And that when you talk and you put the feelings word into a sentence, people engage with you in a way that you don't when you just tell them what they've done wrong or what you want them to do. So the language needs to change. So when
you go into organisations then, what is the most common thing you find yourself saying? Is there a mantra that you say, it's exactly the same problems I had last week and the week before in the other organisations? Do you feel there is a common issue, or is every individual completely an individual and therefore unique and different?
The issues that people face in business are people issues. So they're not process issues because they're easier to solve. Yeah, but the 80% of the issues are people issues, but the way in which it's approached has been the same for many times. And I understand that, because as we're asking leaders to be brave and influential and deal with complex situations, we're also asking the people that invest in those leaders to be brave and take a different decision. What we need to show them is a different way to do things. A lot of the leadership training out there is just what it is. It's leadership training, which looks at the external effects of what's going on. We need to start with leader development, not leadership development. Leadership development doesn't develop leaders. Leader development develops leaders. So we need to start with the leader. They have the biggest reach, the biggest influence. The higher they get up in the organisation, the more important it is. So we need to start with them.
Are you up against a bit of a problem there, because the higher up the organisation, the higher they are to their level of incompetence? And you often hear that expression, promoted to your level of incompetence. And sometimes someone who is good at a particular job ends up being the leader and doesn't have the empathy or the skills to be a leader. So, two questions. So, is that an issue? And is also the issue, is it also the fact that where some people are born leaders and some learn to be leaders?
Oh, that's a whole different programme. We can definitely teach leaders to develop the skills that we've got. Some people have it innately, others don't. But are we finding the same problems time after time? Absolutely. We do get the Peter Principle, rising to their level of incompetence. And what happens is, when times are tough, those leaders stay and the good ones leave. So
hang on, that's the wrong way round.
I know. So what happens, as the saying will say, if you look at my website, is that one of the questions is, what happens if we develop our good leaders and they leave? But what happens if you don't develop them and they stay? And to do that, we need to do something different. And EI is different. And it's different because it's focusing on data that we haven't been taught to use as information. Some people have naturally learnt to do this, but then don't know how to break that down. And if you ask somebody why they think somebody was a good leader, 80% of what they talk about is who they are, not what they did.
Do they challenge you and say, look, this is just a load of gobbledygook?
Absolutely.
And really what you're just talking is just, really, come on, get serious, get real.
Yeah.
So how do you convince people that feel like that? Because I would imagine there are some organisations, there are some leaders that are out there that think they're doing it absolutely perfectly, but probably have a team of people working for them who are scared of them, don't respect them, don't feel that there's any leadership skills at all. But as far as they are concerned, as leaders in the position, they think they're getting it right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are. I'll give you an example. There was somebody who was on a couple of workshops that I did, and every time I looked at him, his face just told me I wasn't connected with them. In fact, I have an
You thought you were telling him nothing?
I'm not sure. That's why I asked him. I went up at the end of it and I said to him, right, Rob, what's going on here? Do you not like me? Am I not answering your questions, or are you not getting this? And he said, I had no idea I looked like that. This is my internal battle with what you're telling me is not connecting with what I needed to hear. I said, well, it's all over your face, and it says, I said, if I was working with you, I'd be thinking you don't like me or you don't want to work with me, so I'm trying to find out what's going on. Now, he has stayed with me and we've worked together on a one-to-one development programme. What a difference. Huge. Right throughout the organisation, he's been promoted, he makes better connections. When people say things he doesn't understand, he asks for clarification, but he doesn't look at them as if it's all their fault. Huge difference. And that's what people are talking about when they're talking about communication.
Do you think across the board and in general, there are a lot, in fact, huge number of inadequate, badly trained, badly knowledgeable leaders out there?
Not at all. I think
really?
Most of them...
You sure that?
No.
You can be honest with me. If you think they're a load of rubbish, just say.
Do you know, my experience with working with leaders, and particular senior leaders, is that They want to change that point of pain that they can't get past, but they're not being given the information to do so. We're regurgitating the same thing. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of leadership development is very, very good, and the models and the things that they teach are good, but how you put that into practice is what matters, and that's what EI looks at. Emotional intelligence is, you have, before going into a situation that you can only make one of two rational choices if you've got a strict budget. It isn't down to the rationale that makes that choice. It's down to who's more influential or who has the loudest voice or is competitive. And we want those leaders to bring people with them, not have them terrified of them. And EI does that. So I'm not afraid of challenging those leaders. Quite happy to.
I know you go into businesses and you're in there for a number of days and you teach them this. Mm-hmm. But if there was maybe something you could say to our viewers that are watching this right now that would make a real change in the way that their leadership style is, so that they became more emotionally attached to what they're doing, so that they had that intelligence. Is there a quick fix? Is there something very, very simple, or at least a starting place that they could go from today?
This is it. People say, can I take a profiling quiz? And there are things out there. It isn't a quick fix, but once you start to change it, it accelerates very quickly. You get faster decisions and you become smarter, quicker with it. The way to start is look at where you are reacting, so it's intuitive. We run on patterns. It keeps our lives intact, otherwise we'd be exhausted. We need a pattern disruptor. We need sometimes to step back, because those patterns of language and behaviours and actions may no longer serve us in this role, in this job. They've come from our childhood, parental influences, all the sort of things before. So is where something's not working, don't think it's somebody else. Take a step back, look at what you felt, acknowledge that you have feelings that have built into this decision. Accept that they're there and find out what they're telling you. And that's much more than changing it and being positive. The problem we've got at the moment is everybody wants to be positive. They don't want any of these negative feelings, which really aren't negative anyway. They're just a bit more difficult to deal with because they have valuable information in them. So if we start to accept them instead of fighting them and trying to change them all the time, we get the valuable information out of them. And then we can go, right, how should I have responded? What would I have liked to have said? What would be the consequence if I'd behaved in a different way? What we do then is we stop the internal battle. And when you stop the internal battle, what I've found, especially at the senior level, is that they have much more time to do their job and influence other people. A leader's job should be do his job or her job, and then what do I do to make everybody else's life easier?
More from Colette Lees in just a few moments' time. We're talking about emotional intelligence. She's a trainer and a speaker, and we're going to be showing you the advantage of emotional intelligence in your business. That's still to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. Don't forget, if you have a question for Colette, if you're watching us on LinkedIn at the moment, you can just go onto the program and leave your questions there, and we will voice them to Colette to see what she comes up with. It could be exciting or it could be very embarrassing, but it's still to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's interesting, the last couple of programs have been kind of looking at leadership to a certain extent, leadership and leadership training. Last week we had Jude Jennison. She was on the program. She has a unique approach to how people... Once again, it's down to the emotions as well, but the emotional intelligence of how you deal with your staff, the empathy that you have with your staff. Now, some people will go and have a chalk and talk course on that. They'll sit there, they'll have death by PowerPoint, and then they'll come out of that and probably never apply any of the things that they learn during that particular talk. What Jude does is something totally different. She will take her candidates away, and they are working with horses. It's just really intriguing. Now, a horse, really, it doesn't know who you are from the next person, but you've got to treat it in a particular manner, a particular way. It can sense, it can smell your fear, it can smell your emotions, and it will respond in a particular way to those particular emotions. And that's what Jude actually does. Great show last week, some really good advice with the key highlights of the programme. Here's Jude Jennison on Business Connections Live. Joining me in the studio today is Jude Jennison. She's from Leaders by Nature.
I work with senior leaders and executive teams to help them align their teams and develop their leaders so that they can accelerate their business results in uncertainty. No, I think there's some outstanding leadership out there. I mean, I think politics accepted, which is not my area of expertise, but I think certainly in business there's some really outstanding leadership across all organisations and all sectors. But I think there's always room for improvement, and I think particularly in uncertainty, we need a different style of leadership and we need different skills. 20 years ago it was very much command and control. You were expected to do what your boss told you to do. Now people want to have much more of an opinion, and by having more of an opinion, people are more engaged, you get more diversity of thought, and you move away from groupthink. You know, it was groupthink that caused the financial crisis in 2008. So it's good that we're moving away from command and control. That requires us to think and behave in a different way. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is to have a sense of what's the impact that I'm creating. Am I getting what I'm wanting? Am I being too focused on the goals? Am I too focused on the people? Are people empathetic? Is there an understanding? But also not being too empathetic that you lose sight of where you're going, because sometimes you have to make tough decisions as well. I think knowledge is less important because everybody can look it up on the internet these days, and actually in the past where a good leader would have all of the knowledge themselves and make the decision, now it's much more important to engage people and include people in the decision-making process. It's not my business to tell people what to do. My business is about helping leaders understand and explore where are they brilliant as leaders, where are they derailing themselves as leaders, as individuals and as a team, and then exploring experientially together, how do they move forward, how do they align as a team, how do they communicate more effectively. I work with a herd of horses, and so I bring leaders and teams out to work with my horses to understand where they're brilliant and where they get stuck. So horses respond based on your non-verbal communication, and people assume that that's body language, but it's so much more than that. So they're responding based on what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your emotions, your intentions, your energy. So you know that person that walks into the room and overpowers the room? Well, the horse will move away from that. But equally, the people pleasers who are just being too nice, the horses won't engage with that either. So what horses want is exactly what people want, which is for us to be absolutely bang on, being assertive, being clear about where we're going, doing it through relationship and communication. I've had companies turn a loss-making division into a profit in just 3 months. I've had small businesses who've exponentially grown their business as a result of developing their teams. Because once you get people in a team aligned and with a level of honesty and openness and transparency, if I told you you were going to stand in a field and get feedback on your leadership skills from a horse, you'd probably think I'm crazy, because all disruption is crazy in the beginning. In the 1990s, when Bill Gates said every home will have a PC in it, we thought he was crazy too, because that's what happens when we're leading radical change. And that's what I'm doing by working with horses and leaders. I'm Jude Jennison, I'm the author of the book Leading Through Uncertainty, and I work with senior leaders and executives to help them lead through uncertainty, to be more confident in not knowing and being out of their comfort zones. And yes, I do it with a herd of horses, and my horses respond based on your non-verbal communication. So what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your intentions, your energy, they respond based on that. My clients are typically blue chip organisations and high growth entrepreneurial small businesses, and my background in IBM enables me to bridge the world between the horses and business. And that's it, really. The horses do amazing work. I've had clients turn a loss-making division into a profit in just 3 months. I've had management buyout be a year ahead of their plan, only 1 year into their plan. Some astonishing results that the horses have got for businesses, for leaders and teams.
A real clever, fascinating insight. Jude Jennison there on last week's edition of Business Connections Live. A really, really great show. And there is that line in there where she's got executives stepping back for a moment and they're assessing whether they are emotionally connected with the horses and whether it's working or not with them. Really, really good show. If you want to watch the entire program, then simply go to our website at Business Connections Live. Don't forget, if you're thinking to yourself too, boy, I'd love to have a program just like this, or I'd like to either be on it. What's good about this show is it positions you as an expert in your field. If you are an expert in your field, you need to be sitting here. You need to be telling us why you're an expert in your field, what skills you bring, and why it's important to your potential clients, your future customers, why they should be talking to you. That's what this program is all about. It's giving you an opportunity to highlight the skills that you have within your particular skill set, your profession, your industry, your market sector, your niche. Gives you the opportunity to highlight why you're so good at doing that, and to talk about it, and to demonstrate that, and to prove it. Now, if you're thinking this is going to be absolutely ideal for you, if it's right up your street, then why don't you get in touch with us here? It's dead easy to do. Have a chat with us anyway, but drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com, or you can have a word with either myself or the lovely Linda Bazant. She is on the end of this telephone number, 01784 256 777. Don't forget also, you can follow our stream of consciousness as well at BCL Business TV. That's on Twitter. You can also watch the program each and every week on our Facebook page. It goes on and on and on. You can watch us on LinkedIn, where you can leave comments, and thank you very much for all the people that are watching us on LinkedIn at the moment. We really appreciate it. Even if you don't have a question for my guest today, please just give us a thumbs up or an applaud or whatever you want to do. Just show that you're there and that you're breathing. We like that. And also, the best place to go to find out and to see all the programs is to go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. There's over 200, and this is program 284. There's around about 400 hours worth of content up there at the moment if you're interested, and all of it is for free at the moment, free access. So you can go there, you can look at all things, everything from marketing, sales techniques, social media, how to raise funds for your, everything is there at the website, businessconnectionslive.com. Today we are talking about the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence. My guest on today's show is Colette Lees. She's an emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. Some people, Colette, may say, well, this is all very well, and it's just, people have written books about this. It's just a quick way to make a buck. There must be some real science behind this.
There is, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why there is an interest in this area, and it's a growth area for businesses to develop. And we know that we deal with emotional and rational data at the same time. So when I'm talking to people, I need to connect with the people that are going, but with a question like that, why should I bother? What's in it? Now we have the fMRI scanning. So what we can do, I'm not doing it, I report on the research that's done. I do research, but not into neuroscience. We have a whole growth in the field of neuroscience which is supporting what we've known instinctively and have been able to do in the social sciences for years. We now have neuroscience behind it that absolutely supports what we know about emotional intelligence. For example, there is a researcher called Mary Helen Imadino-Yang who works in California, and she talks about something called the task positive network. Now, we're in a society where we have more information than we can possibly process. We have emails, look at this program, it's streaming on how many social media areas. We are bombarded with information. Now, what happens is our brains are set up so that we will follow this task positive network and it will do the next thing in front of it. When it becomes overwhelmed, when there's too much, so when you open your emails after being away on a training course for a day and there's 400 emails, you don't know where to start. And what happens with this task positive network is that it goes into meltdown. It can no longer function. We can't be creative, so our senior leaders can't be creative. They can't be visionaries. The biggest skill that's missing in the business world is creativity and visionary leaders. And the reason is not because they're not there, they're in task overwhelm. So their task positive network is always on function. Now, when that happens, you cannot prioritize. Not only can you not be creative, you cannot prioritize.
But that sounds like so many people in their positions. In fact, that what you've just described, to a certain extent, is us. Mm-hmm. It's me, definitely. That there is so much to do that you end up not doing any of it.
Yes. So we need to activate another part of the brain called the default network. And if we don't do that, our bodies will make us do it anyway. So that's where you get burnout. That's where you get good people leaving. That's where you get sickness, where people go off with stress. So we can do that in between. And the reason that we can't do it is because we don't know that we have to activate this other network, which is fairly easy to do, small steps to begin with. And that when we learn to take the data from our emotions, we do that quicker, so we can get through the tasks quicker, because we're not having an internal battle with ourselves that's going, how should I have done that? It's smarter, faster, once you know how to do this.
When you say take the data from our emotions, and you've mentioned this a few times, that kind of data that's there, what exactly do you mean by that? How do we visualize what you're talking about? What are the emotions that I am pulling upon, and what information am I retrieving that's going to help me?
Well, that's the point. We're not. What we tend to do is focus on the facts. So if you go into a meeting and you know that there's always somebody difficult that you're going to deal with, you don't go in saying to yourself, right, okay, this time I know what I'm dealing with. I know I'm frustrated. I know I'm angry. I know this might be difficult. You go in going, they're going to be difficult. So the focus becomes somebody else. So we don't come back to ourselves. We can only deal with our feelings. So we need to know what we're feeling going into and in a situation. Then we can go, right, yes, I'm frustrated. What will I do with that? I'm going to park it and I'm going to listen to what they have to say this time, because that person's just been on a training course with me and they're going to give you something different, but you're not going to hear it if you're not listening. And when our emotions are in overdrive, our ability to listen completely goes out the window.
All right, so that's the kind of top layer of it. That's the top level. That's when you go in there and you go, by the way, here is the science of what I'm talking about. What about the realities of all of this? You talk about the fact that the emotional intelligence will give us a competitive advantage. Now, the moment you say competitive advantage, I'm sure that CEOs, managing directors, senior management, team leaders are sitting up going, all right then, how? Right,
okay. So let me go back to 1995. When there was a chap called John Kay who was working at Cambridge University, went on to be a professor there, and he was given the task to find out why businesses were in business for a long time. So he went out and he interviewed lots of businesses, and he came back with his book, which I can't remember the name of right at the minute, but I will do at some point. It'll come to me. And what he talked about, what he found in his research, so this is a good few years ago, what he found in his research was that there were 3 things that help businesses stay in business for a long time. Now, the sort of business he was talking about then were IBM, Hewlett-Packard, we now have Virgin, Dyson, all sorts of businesses that have been in the industry for a long time. And he found there were 3 things that helped businesses stay in business. This research has been replicated over and over again. And
I'm about to write these down.
You know are, aren't you? Yeah, absolutely. If anybody's trained with me, they will know this automatically. Reputation brings you a competitive advantage.
Yep.
But it's hard to build and very quick to lose.
There's an old expression in radio, it's 2 years to build an audience, 10 minutes for them to forget.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the same, isn't it?
Then you have innovation. So people like Apple, Dyson come to mind.
Right.
Patents only last so long, everybody copies it.
Yep.
And then he came up with something called architecture.
So this is what people. This is the bit that people don't get.
This is the bit people don't get. Architecture, and what John Kay was referring to was the ability to build internal and external relations. So stakeholder relationships, doesn't matter who it is, to build those that you cannot put in a contract, not even a psychological contract that we have today. What it does is that people build relationships with the people around them, with their customers, with their colleagues, in and through the business. And what he found was architecture was the strongest at businesses staying in business, so building a sustainable competitive advantage. If you put it with one of the other 2 or both of them, you're on fire. But what he also found was that it's very hard to teach. How do you replicate that? How do you break that down? In 1995, on the other side of the world, we had Daniel Goleman publicising and popularising the term emotional intelligence. And it's the architecture of building relationships. So how do you build relationships? You look at the integration of our decision making. Every single decision that we make uses rational and emotional data. When we acknowledge that, we get clearer, faster, better decisions, which helps us build relationships, connect with people, increase wellness. The list goes on. Is
it a case of just being nice to other people? And somebody once said we've got 2 eyes and we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen in that ratio. Listen more, speak less.
Yeah, to a point, yes. But if what we're doing then is suppressing who we are and what we feel, then that won't work either, because it's not sustainable. And that's why coaching is great. I use coaching. I am a coach. I'm a business coach. But it's not the only thing. So if by being nice to other people, we're not being congruent to ourselves, so we've still got that internal battle, then we're just going to add to the problem later on, and it's not sustainable. But it is good to listen to other people, because you'll usually find what you need there.
Well, the other thing that you come across as well, isn't it, the people who think to talk and other people that talk to think.
Yeah.
So people feel sometimes that they're making a point, or they're more at the front because they never shut up.
Yeah.
They make all the noise.
So the question to ask yourself every time you have a conversation, and it can be quite exhausting to begin with, but it becomes natural after a while, is what's your intent? What's my intent when I say this? What's my intent with the other person when I talk to them? What do I actually want? Are we contributing to, Dr. Phil in the States says, are we contributing or contaminating that relationship? And it's usually about how we feel about the other person or a situation, or more likely something else that's happened that's completely not related to it. EI helps you isolate what's going on at the time, so you learn to process emotions that are not related to somebody else.
There's a lot here that seems that you could apply to everyday life.
Absolutely.
To relationships that we have everywhere. It sometimes seems that we put on a different skin when we walk into our corporate lives, and leaders sometimes feel that they have to behave differently from what they would do socially. So how do you change that psyche? How do you break through that outer shell and get to the person within and say, look, that's the person who should be leading, not this facsimile of you that's on the outside that doesn't seem to listen, doesn't seem to have any empathy, and doesn't seem to really get it right with the people, doesn't listen.
Yeah.
How do you break that? How do you break that barrier down?
I have to build a trust with them, and it's step by step. So when I work with individuals, with leaders, we spend some time together, and I don't tell them anything. I usually do a profiling tool, and I'll look at the results from that. It's a starting point. It gives me a guide as to how to work with people. This is not who they are. It's just a snapshot of how they're working at the moment. And then it's a matter of building trust, so I can do that. And what I do is I show them, there's so much information about there. You could read everything that I'm telling you today. What we need to do is change it so that there's application. Once I start to show them how they can do it differently, even by changing one or two words in their language for themselves, we start with them.
Change a couple of words. Change a couple of words that people tend to use. I'm sure you must have said, I don't want to do it like that. You want to do it like this. What kind of words are we talking about?
Right, okay then. So I worked with a client where everything was a nightmare. Absolutely everything that went wrong in his life was a nightmare. Well, when you say nightmare, it was huge, isn't it? You know, you have this big sort of thing that I can't control and nothing is right. And what that does, that word then stimulates internal and external responses. His internal responses to the situation, which impacts everything else that's going on. So he was always, and it was battle language. When we looked at the word nightmare and said, right, if you could change that word for another word, what would it be? And we brainstormed, if we're allowed to use that word anymore, lots and lots of different things. You can scale it, so you can scale your language. So we played with it, and he would ring up and say, well, this is a little difficult, or, you know, that's complicated. And you know what? When you use those words, they are very different and produce different emotions in you, therefore different internal and external reactions. So just by changing one or two words, it was like, wasn't using all his energy to solve every single problem.
What was the word you replaced it with? Can you remember?
He replaced it with various ones for what he was doing. It was up to him. That's up to the client. I won't do that. I want them to choose their words, not me give them to them, because it has to resonate with them. And then they play with it and they practice it. A lot of the stuff we do is very playful.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's very easy to have the word when something goes wrong, and that you vocalise it, you use that vocalisation to really emphasise it to yourself. And if you step back for a moment, it probably isn't that bad at all.
Not at all. We need to learn to respond to situations, not react to them all the time. And when we're in pattern mode, we need something that disrupts it.
Great line. Do not respond, react. Very good. My guest today is Colette Leeds, emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. We're talking about the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence on this edition of Business Connections Live. Hope you enjoyed today's programme. Just a moment or so, Colette there was talking about neuroscience, how to influence with the science of emotion. Business Connections Live 150. Dr. Linda Shaw was on the programme. She's a neuroscientist. On this edition of Business Connections Live, we were talking about how we understand how our brain works, how we can influence our behaviour and the behaviours of others simply by understanding the situation and the circumstances that we're in. Communication is the foundation of everything, and getting it wrong causes a tidal wave of problems. Get it right and everything runs smoothly. With the key takeaways from that programme, here is Dr. Linda Shaw.
Hello everyone, I'm Linda Shaw. I'm a neuroscientist and a psychologist, and I love working with the ambitious. I love working with business owners, business founders, people who really want to do something and understand people to grow their business and maybe get their pot of gold in 5 years' time. So, my 3 takeaway tips for you to make your business grow by building relationships well with your teams and your clients and your customers is, first of all, remember that emotion is key to all decision making. Emotion is key to everything you do. So if you have maybe a message at work or something that's some kind of core value that you have as business, make sure that emotion that you have in that core value, everybody in your firm knows about it. Everybody talks about it, so you're all aligned with the one thing that you really want your customers, your clients to feel. So that's a big one. My second tip is try to build trust as much as you can, but remember that trust has a dark side, so you have to be as trustworthy as you possibly can be. So I think that's really important as well. And thirdly, if you are going to make big decisions, which of course you will have to make big decisions, get others talking, talk to others, get feedback from them, gather your data, and remember your perception is never reality. There is no such thing. Your perception is flawed, and their perceptions you will need to take on board for those really awesome decisions. So good luck.
I love that. Good luck. Dr. Linda Shaw there, good friend of the programme, kind of really supporting what you've been saying as well, which is really interesting. Once again, if you want to watch that program, you just go back to our website. You'll find that Dr. Linda Shaw is Business Connections Live 150, and that went out in October of 2016. So a really good show. Once again, supporting exactly what we're talking about today. The competitive advantage of emotional intelligence. My guest on today's show is Colette Lees. She's an emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. Interesting to hear nearly the mirroring of what you've been saying there from Linda Shaw. That must be quite reassuring as well, that the neuroscience is all there. Yeah. There are a lot of people that look at neuroscience, they look at neuro-linguistic programming, they look at all of this and they think it's all a bit of bunkum, don't they? How do you get around that as
well, neuro-linguistic programming is a completely different thing.
Completely
even though
it's got the word neuro in it.
Yeah, because it's of the mind, it's the language that we use, so it is a different discipline. It definitely helps. Part of NLP will help to develop your EI once you know what EI is, but NLP won't develop EI if you don't know what EI is. You need to know what emotional intelligence. Yeah, absolutely. You talk about mirroring. The reason this is I'm going to go back to your first question when you said, what do you say when people don't say? Go and read the science. It's out there. It's available. So this is not just me reporting. I am a researcher. I do research. I'm very interested in what happens when you teach a little bit of emotional intelligence to leaders. My experience is, and this is a research area I'm in at the moment, is my experience is they develop very, very quickly, smarter, quicker, because they're already at the top of the game. So we're just tweaking some points here. Now, you talk about mirroring. The reason that I like to work with senior leaders is because they have a massive reach. They have an influence, whether they are physically visible in an organisation or not. Their reach is tremendous. They have the biggest influence. So we want that influence to be the right influence, the right tone. And the reason they have this influence is because of something called mirror imaging. So Marco Iacoboni talked about mirror imaging. And again, it's all to do with the neuroscience behind it. If you imagine I can influence you and you can influence me with what's going on at the time, but it doesn't just work like that. If you imagine the 1970s disco ball, the mirror ball, and all the little facets around it. Yeah, so me too. And all around it.
Flares.
How many? They're coming back. How many reflections does that have? And that's what it's like. They set the tone, just as you very kindly put me at ease to do this today. And that has affected, me being able to talk to you very clearly about some of these things. Is you set the tone in an organisation and that cascades out. So it's really important that the senior leaders are effective in EI. because everybody else they won't quite know what it is, but they'll know there's something there. Then we can train them.
Well, you talked earlier on about the early warning signals and how emotions serve as the early warning signals.
They do.
But I think the thing is, sometimes it's understanding what those emotions and what those early warning signals are. It's a bit like you're receiving the information, but you're doing nothing with it. And I suppose this goes back to the data again,
yes.
that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You're getting the data, but you're not processing it, you're not doing anything.
You're not using it, you're not applying it.
But so how do you recognise it? Is that when you go into the businesses and you stand there and go, by the way, if you feel like this, then that is this. Can you do that with it? Because some people need that kind of solidity in the conversation so they know exactly what you're talking about.
When I go into organisations, I don't like to talk about it. As much as I love to talk about it, I would prefer to go in and do a workshop with them. I can do a workshop in 90 minutes and 2 hours and have people experience this, so they start to experience that internal transformation and go, you know what, this is slightly different. I haven't had this experience before. What we need then is to continue that into transformation, which is exactly what happened with the last company that I've worked with for the last 18 months. I had one girl on a one-day course who'd been offered a global role. She didn't want to take it for the second time. She realised from listening to what we did on the first course, I had no idea this was going on, but she came to me at the end of the day and said, will you mentor me? Not only did what she said was it released her time and energy looking at this and knowing what to do with the data that she got from her emotions, because we put it to one side. It's not possible to make a decision without taking your emotions into account.
Just tell me what the emotion is I'm waiting to receive. Is it the emotion of anger? Is it the emotion of longing? Is it the emotion of sadness? Is it the emotion of overjoyedness, if such a word? But what is the emotions that we're talking about? Or is it... It's just,
I'm getting at the moment you're feeling a little frustrated because I'm not giving you that.
I'm frustrated. Is it the emotion of frustration?
You have to recognise that must be. What is it that you're feeling now? Because I'm not answering your question clearly. EI is such a huge area. That's the thing. If I'm not answering your question clearly, how do you then respond to me? Do you keep questioning me, or do you go, am I understanding this? Is my frustration.
Just walk out the door and slam the door behind
absolutely.
Me. The emotion of anger.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't come in ones, they come in piles. A bit like the results, when you start to get the results, they come in piles. They're multiples.
Oh, right.
In there. They come in multiples. So if you say to somebody, give me the one thing that you're feeling at the time, their answer should probably be no. Because there isn't usually one, there's usually lots of feelings, and they're all giving different information. Something has sparked that feeling. It's a chemical that's released in our body from an internal or external stimulus, goes round, we make it into a feeling.
All right then, so we're receiving the information, we're understanding that we're receiving the information,
hopefully,
and that we now have the emotional intelligence. What are the key benefits then to an organisation, to a business? I mean, what kind of results have you seen? You've mentioned that things have changed and they've changed dramatically, but in what kind of a way? What kind of sectors within the business? You got leadership, is it in sales? All of a sudden sales have exploded. Is it marketing? Marketing has become more effective.
The bottom line, profitability, is what's affected at every level. My recent work has been with an international aerospace organisation. So we're talking about aerospace detection here. So we're not talking touchy-feely soft skills. We're talking scientists and engineers. So I'm working, those are the senior executives that I've worked with.
So very black and white.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Rob, that I mentioned earlier, was very much a scientist. And it was his thing is to problem solve. So his brain automatically goes to, no, that won't work. What do I do with it? But that is what he was giving out to other people. So now we've taught him that it's okay to feel that and want to say that, but how does he connect with other people? Because people who are visionaries, who are going, no, we want to take this project forward, don't want to hear the naysayer going, this won't work. And yet both lots of intellectual information is necessary. He's coming up with very good things that need to be taken into account before we go way down the line investing in something, or designing a new piece of machinery, or designing a plant, something that needs to be built on a production line, thousands of dollars. Because his communication is much more effective now, he can have his input and people will listen to him more. What else has been the result? I've worked with a client who actually moved companies because they didn't value emotional intelligence, and she's been promoted 3 different times now into a global role, looking after quality and continuous improvement. My work recently is with a lean continuous improvement team, and the results of that is that 2-3 of them have been promoted, and that they are that they're having a reach out into the business where people are coming to them with problems and they can solve them quicker and faster, and people are staying in role. They have actually lost 1 or 2 good people already. People stay where they feel valued, and they are being developed. Investing in senior development is quite a tricky decision.
You know, it's interesting because I was going to ask you, if the culture or the ethos of an organisation is to develop this emotional intelligence, it doesn't matter what level you're at, because everybody in one form or another is a leader within their role,
Yes. Yeah.
regardless of where they are. The senior warehouse man is a leader of the guys in the warehouse, and the warehouse operatives are leaders to the people below them, and so it goes on. So everybody seems to be ideally placed for this kind of training. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And when I worked with the girl that decided to take the global role, and I mentored her into that and taught her about emotional intelligence and how to coach properly, then what we did was worked with her team as well. We didn't just develop her, but we worked with her team, so the hotel developed, and then that development, we then opened it up to the wider business, and people who are already, they would call them the continuous improvement champions, were interested in what they did, came into that training too, and it has snowballed and cascaded.
This is a funny question I'm going to ask you now. When I say funny, I don't mean ha-ha, I mean peculiar. Do you think, is there anybody this isn't suitable for, or is this a life skill that we should all have?
Everybody should have this. You were already doing it in some areas where your life is flowing. If you imagine like an ECG chart, where your life is flowing nicely like this, and there'll be some areas, like you say, we have different personas. That's not healthy. It's too time consuming and energetic. We want to be the same person in business, in our relationships, with family, with friends. And where we have this, where you're already using this, we want to transfer it into other areas. You don't have to put that cloak on and be somebody else. So it applies to everybody.
But there are a lot of people in business that do put this persona on, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what they've been taught to do. They've been given a set of skills that says, if you want to be a good leader, be like this. And if they've not had it on a leadership training program, they've emulated somebody more senior. But it doesn't feel quite right to them. And if it doesn't feel quite right to them for long enough, they will leave. Or they'll stay and not develop, so you get to your level of incompetence. It's really important, especially at senior level.
And get to it very quickly as well in some cases. So, what about, how do then businesses identify that this is going to be right for them? Because there's 2 ways this is going to happen. You pick the phone up, you have a word with somebody in their leadership team, and you say to them, you probably need this, but you don't know you need this. So how do you get that message over, and how do you convince them that they do need to identify this? Is there something that we could sit back on and go, actually, if I answer this question truthfully, then I know I need that kind of training?
Well, I want to know what their challenges are. So if somebody calls me, I will ask them what their challenges are and what they're already doing about it. Again, for instance, a company I worked with recently and did a 2-day influencing leaders course. They had somebody in giving them great information, but wouldn't give them information prior to training their senior executives. They wouldn't give them the information as what was to be on the course. My first question was, what do you want the outcome to be? What do you want your leaders to be doing more of that they're not already doing? What are the challenges that they face? And then we map out something that leads to that end. If you haven't had any foray into EI, or you're not sure how it's going to work, pick the phone up, have a conversation with me, and we put together a workshop. It's tailored to the organisation and their needs, so we find out what's going on. The premise of emotional intelligence is the same, but the starting point for individuals and companies can quite often be different. We end up teaching the similar sort of thing, and then you can develop it in groups. Senior level you really need, because they are quite set in their patterns, and let's face it, they're senior for a reason. They've got there because they can do what they want, what they need to do. So it's only tweaking in that direction. So, but it depends where you're starting one. But find out what you are investing in. I do what they call evidence-based training, which means I have one foot in academia. I'm not an academic, as my ex-university colleagues will tell you. I'm not an academic, I'm a practitioner, but I do have the knowledge, which means that I can bring it out and see if it works. One informs the other.
There's some more from my guest today. I hope you're finding it interesting. Colette Lee's emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. We're talking about the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence within your business. More in just a few seconds' time. In fact, once again, I did say earlier on, if you fancy coming on the programme, if you feel that you are in your niche an expert, then we're always looking for guests to be on the programme. So do get in touch with us. We'll tell you how you can go about doing that. You simply just go to our website. If you feel you don't have the necessary skills, then I'm supposed to assume certain extent, this is what Colette is saying. It's identifying whether you have the skill set or identifying at least what the issue is so that you can do something about it. If you feel you don't have the skill set to talk to the media, to be in a studio like this, we're surrounded by, we've got 4 cameras to it looking at us. We've got one that's above me as well. It's quite a lonely environment, I think, sometimes sitting 10 foot in front of a camera. If you find for your business that you're doing that more and more often, and maybe you have reporters as well behind the cameras that are asking you questions, how do you prepare for that? How do you get ready for that? If that's something that really interests you, if you feel that's something that could help maybe increase the value of your organization or your business, and you need training on that, we do run courses here at Business Connections Live, which is called How to Handle the Media. And what we do is we take you through a very simple process of, first of all, understanding how to talk about you, understanding how long a minute is, for instance. That's a pretty good thing to be taught. And then from that, we take you on to TV, television interviews, down the line interviews, how you sit in the studio, how you have an earpiece in, how you respond, how you look, where you look when you're in a television studio. And then we also explore the whole area of radio as well, where we will sit down with you and we'll take you through, effectively, in inverted commas, a radio interview program where you're taking telephone calls. And we do this along with your organization if you are coming in as a group of people, and it is a turnkey kind of delivery. So the things that we talk about are the things that you will have already talked about within your organization. They will be relevant to you. And here's a question for you right now. How much is in the public domain about the company or the business that you currently work for that you're just not aware of? Have you ever Googled yourself to see what people are saying about your business? That can be a real wake-up call. So we show you, we tell you, and we give you advice on how to control that. The one thing I would say to you is, what is the worst question somebody could ask you, and do you have an answer ready for it? If you want more details about our training courses, you can go to our website, easy to do as always, or you can drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com, or let's have a chat on this one. Don't follow any stream of consciousness. Give us a call, 01784 256 777. If you go to the website, there is a form you can fill in. It'll take you through all the reasons why you should be going on the training course and explain some of the key objectives that we are trying to get over to help you be better when you're handling the media. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. Today we are talking about the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence within your organisation, within your business. My guest on today's show is Colette Lees. She's an emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. It has been really, really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people don't realise it. And it's lovely to see that also the website, I'll just make certain that you can't see all my, let's make it full screen. This is the website. You can go onto the website. It's a brand new website. I actually had a look for this on Friday.
Wasn't there?
It wasn't there on Friday, but here it is now.
It is now.
There it is now. What happens if we develop our leaders and they leave? What happens if we don't and they stay? Emotional intelligence tells you more about that. How can someone so smart act so dumb? That's a question we've all asked ourselves, particularly here. My director asks that so often. Business applications, we keep looking for the answer to create competitive advantage and develop great leaders when the truth is we already have it. And then working with Colette, telling you a little bit more about the development programs and speaking events. But it's a great site. Go onto the site. It's going to give you good advice, the what and the why of EI. If you've found what was said today interesting and insightful, then go onto the website. There is a really good piece. How can someone so smart act so dumb? It's a great piece. Read that. It'll give you a real insight into the ethos behind what Colette has been talking about today.
There's also a great case study on there that's just been published in a recent academic textbook which I contributed to, so you'll find the link to that on there.
Is it on there?
It is,
on
yeah.
the
If you
page.
go to the publications and media page.
Publications and media?
I'm
pressing
you
the
will
link.
find it.
I'm doing as I'm told right now.
And it's a case study I was invited to, second one down, yours is the top.
Here we are.
And here you have the link to, not that one, next one up beforehand.
Well, that one there.
That one there, yeah. So there was an academic textbook, and I was asked by a couple of people who were authoring this, university lecturers, which I used to be, and would I contribute? So it's a case study with an ex-client. She's a friend now, and we still work together occasionally. And so that's a case study with very practical, hard results. Again, aerospace industry.
It's interesting, you're talking about people who are very black or white, right or wrong, guilty or innocent, hang 'em high.
I love it.
Do a lot of people, though, when you start delving into this and you start talking about this, because you are peeling away like an onion, aren't you? You're getting down to raw emotions. Do people feel uncomfortable actually going through the process?
Yes. Is the simple word to that. You always need tissues. My husband will say to me, or my other half will say to me, you know, who did you make cry today? And that's men and women. But we need to be uncomfortable to begin with, to be able to get to the comfort zone. So because our comfort zone is not a comfort zone, this does take you to a different place. But what I've found with this is the acceleration very quickly out of it, because we're, to replicate the beer, we're touching parts that other beers or other training hasn't touched before. So it can feel uncomfortable to begin with. But that's why when it comes to executive development, although you can give the information in a workshop, it needs to be individual. This needs to be personal. We need to build trust with that. And I do that by not telling them what's going on, but asking them and showing them through some of the things that they will do, exercises that they will do for me, and then we talk about that. They then get the learning. They don't need me telling them. They start to understand it. They have a sounding board. I fill in the gaps of the knowledge that's missing, and then they can start to put it into practice, and then their reflective learning comes in all the time. You have to experience it. Just reading about it doesn't change.
Well, I was going to say to you, does it take a you to be asking the questions, or are there 3 or 4 questions that somebody after this program could sit down and ask themselves and then answer truthfully? Are there some questions that they can answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can. But the first thing is what we said earlier, is what am I feeling in any given situation? So if you're feeling uncomfortable, as in this doesn't feel right for you, don't think about the other person. Think about what you're feeling at that time. And we need to find a meaning in that feeling. So every feeling has wisdom in it. It has information in it. We need to find what that information is. Again, brief example, I was working with a lady who was going through a divorce, and she was still very angry at her nearly ex-partner, and yet she'd made the decision. She wanted to leave. She knew this is what she wanted. And when we started to look at what that anger meant, she knew why she was angry, but she didn't really have the meaning of the anger. So there was wisdom in that. There was knowledge in that. And actually the anger was because she was having to start again, something she'd done sort of 10 years before. So when she started to realize that the anger was not at him in the situation, but the fact that she was having to start again, next time that came up, it changed the focus of where she put her energy. So it no longer went at shouting at him, it went at actually building a future. So when we shift the energy, when we know what the anger is telling us, we find the wisdom, the meaning in the feelings, then we can decide what to do with it. While it's still all this mess and a jumbled muddle, you don't know what to do with it, and you keep repeating patterns because it's worked and got you where you are, which if it's senior level is already quite high. What I do is I come in, unravel, and just pull a few strings out and go, is that really where you want to be doing? What is the consequence? EI is supported, depending on which model, but they're all fairly similar, by a number of individual competencies. I work with a practitioner model. I also work with a dedicated business model, which talks about language we wouldn't normally use in work: intuition, resilience, empathy, conscientiousness. So it is different language.
But they are all used within industry.
Yes.
But do you feel that they're giving lip service to those words?
Yeah, absolutely. So I show them the meaning of those and where it works in a business environment and the difference that it will make. And it does make a difference, and quickly.
Do you know, it's been really, really interesting today. I really mean that. And I think that this whole area, I don't know about you, I hope some of this has been helpful to you as well. And perhaps your organisation, your company, you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, I don't need it. What would you say to someone that says, well, we don't need this? Do you think everybody needs this?
Everybody needs it. Everybody needs it. It's a life skill. It's a life skill. Be brave and have a look at it.
All right. We invite our guests always at the end of each and every programme, just a bit, I know you said you were dreading, but it's going to be fine. Straight down camera number 4, say who you are and what you do. And really what this is the key takeaways that we should be walking away from this programme and remembering. So whatever they are, it's down to you. But who you are and where you're from, straight down camera number 4. The airwaves, Colette, are all yours.
I'm Colette Lees, and for the last 20 years I've been at the forefront of emotional intelligence in the UK and the US, and delivering training in Europe as well. I work with organisations, with business leaders, with organisations, in particular senior leaders and their teams, to develop business programs that are based in emotional intelligence. The businesses that I work with have seen fantastic results. It all results in bottom line profitability. They retain their good leaders. They have a better employee engagement, which we're still measuring. And they also have less conflict in their working environments. They hang on to their good people. So what I want you to get from today, from 3 things that I want you to take away, and they're the questions that get asked most, is what is emotional intelligence? Why should we be using it, and what to do next? Emotional intelligence is on nearly every top 10 list for leaders' skills that I've looked at in the last couple of weeks for this decade. It wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago. It's now on every list that I've seen as a requirement. We need it to be more than a tick box. Every single decision that we make is based on emotional and rational data. If we cannot separate the two. So we need to become emotionally intelligent. We're becoming more aware of our feelings because there's a lot of it out there in the press and people are doing it. The intelligence comes when we turn it round and we start to apply that knowledge. And we need help to do that if we've not been trained. And even if you know how to do that, can you then explain it to somebody else? So emotional intelligence is the intelligent use of the data in your emotions. Why is it important and why now? Every single decision that we make is based on emotional and rational data. It's important now because you cannot switch the TV on or read a headline or pick up a news stream feed that doesn't talk about wellness and well-being. When we are overwhelmed, when things get so very complicated for us, we are in a position where our brain will freeze and we cannot make those decisions. We cannot make them well, we cannot prioritise, and the results of that can be catastrophic. And in particular, it's important with senior leaders. They are setting the tone of the organisation, so we need to show them how to do it. Most leaders, in my experience, want to do this, they just don't know how. So when we show them something different, which is what this is for most people, then they can develop that. So what do you do next? Well, Steve asked me earlier, what is it that we need to say to leaders? It's not just the leaders. We need our leaders to be, and we're requiring of them to be brave, to deal with complexity, to take a leap of faith and to do things differently. Well, you know, the budget holders, the HR managers, the senior leaders, the change agents in businesses need to do that first. Get in touch. I will come into your organisation or somebody who delivers the EI and we will show you how it works. I won't tell you, I will show you. 90 minutes of your time. If you're further down that EI journey, we look how we map this into leadership training. But take that first step and have us come in and talk to you so that we can show you the results of this in 90 minutes for individuals. We can't affect long-term transformation in that time, but I can certainly show you what it is and where it will make a difference and bring tangible business results to your organisation.
And she was worried about doing that. Really, very, very good indeed. And to the point, a great summary for a really interesting program today. My thanks to Colette Lees, emotional intelligence trainer and speaker. Today we've been talking about the competitive advantage of emotional intelligence. Colette, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, thanks.
If you want to find out more about Colette, if you want to follow her on LinkedIn, we're going to beat her with a stick with a nail through the end of it now. She's going to be upping her LinkedIn profile a teeny weeny bit. Oh yes, she says. And she's going to be building a tribe on Facebook, and she's going to be out there on the Twitter spectrum, and she's going to be sending messages on a regular basis. If you want to find out more about Colette, you can either go to her website. You'll find all the contact, all the links there for Colette, also at businessconnectionslive.com. Find the program. It's the last one. It's going to be sitting there in the list. Go to the page for the program. You get show notes on there. It tells you what we've been talking about. It also gives you a summary of the key things that we've talked about as well today. The entire program is there. We hope today you have found something that is emotionally useful for you and will change the way that you perceive yourself and your relationship with the people who work around you. We hope you found it really, really useful. My thanks once again, Colette, for joining us today.
Welcome.
Okay, that wraps up for the day's program. Let's have a look and see who's coming up on future editions of the program. Kath Lloyd is going to be joining us on a future edition. Making the Change is what it says here. Michelle McMaster. Now, Kitsingu Healing. Kitsingu Healing, I think that's how you pronounce it. Kitsingu Healing with Michelle McMaster. Brian Norris, Living Memories. Now, this is a really clever idea. And we've got Penny Haslam, the award-winning inspirational speaker. She's got a brand new book out. bought a copy of the book. It's called Being a Little Bit Famous. It's exactly what you've done today. Penny Haslam, ex-TV presenter, ex-radio presenter. She's written a book. She's now a corporate speaker. And she's explaining why we should all be just a little bit famous. Warren Knight, professional speaker, on his upcoming book, along with Brad Burton, the UK's leading motivational speaker. That wraps up today's show from Colette Lees and myself, Steve Hunter. Thank you very much for joining us till we do it live again next Monday. Have a great week.
Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel.